It was a warm Florida afternoon in November 1998. The kind of day when children spilled out into the streets, laughter echoing through the suburban neighborhood of Lakewood. Parents raked leaves, neighbors waved hello, and for a while, everything felt safe, ordinary, but that illusion of safety would be shattered forever. 8-year-old Maddie Clifton, a girl full of energy, smiles, and boundless curiosity, vanished without a trace. One moment she was outside, playing, enjoying the carefree joy of childhood, and the next, she was gone. Her disappearance launched a search that consumed the entire community, drawing in hundreds of volunteers, police officers, and reporters. For days, everyone hunted for answers. Flyers went up on telephone poles. TV crews broadcast Maddie's picture across the nation, and neighbors opened their homes and garages in desperate hope. Among those searching was her 14-year-old neighbor, Joshua Phillips. He smiled nervously, handed out flyers, and reassured others that Maddie would be found. But what no one knew, what no one could even imagine, was that Maddie's body was lying just feet away, hidden beneath the waterbed in Joshua's bedroom. This is the story of how an entire community was blindsided by an unthinkable crime. The story of Joshua Phillips, a boy who became a killer, and the little girl whose life was stolen in an instant. A case that, to this day, still haunts investigators. Lakewood was the kind of neighborhood where children rode bikes until dark and families left their doors unlocked. Maddie Clifton was at the center of that world of bright, spunky girl with a gap-toothed smile and a love for sports. She was only 8 years old, but already she had a reputation for being fearless. She loved playing baseball with the boys, loved climbing, running, and laughing louder than anyone else. Her parents adored her. Her older sister recalled later how Maddie seemed to light up every room she entered. There was no reason to believe that this ordinary Monday afternoon in November would be any different from all the others. Joshua Phillips, meanwhile, was the boy who lived down the street. 14 years old, quiet, awkward, and shy. He was the kind of teenager who blended into the background, who didn't attract much attention. His parents described him as obedient, though sometimes withdrawn. He loved video games, tinkering with electronics, and spending hours alone in his room. The two families knew each other casually. Maddie would occasionally stop by to see Joshua, sometimes asking him to come outside and play. On November 3rd, she did just that. That afternoon, Maddie was playing outside near her home. Around 5 p.m., she walked over to Joshua's house. His parents weren't home. His father, known to be strict and hot-tempered, was still at work. Joshua's mother was out running errands. What exactly happened next has never been entirely clear. Joshua's own account, given later in a police interview, is chilling in its simplicity. He claimed that Maddie wanted to play baseball, and in a moment of panic after accidentally hitting her in the eye with the ball, he pulled her inside the house. From there, the story turns dark. Terrified of his father's reaction, knowing his father forbade him from having friends over when no adults were home, Joshua said he panicked. Instead of helping Maddie, instead of calling for help, he dragged her into his room. What followed was an unthinkable act. Joshua struck her repeatedly with a baseball bat, then, in a frenzy of fear and confusion, stabbed her with a knife. He would later admit that Maddie was still alive, moaning in pain, as he shoved her small body beneath his waterbed, a decision that ensured her death. When Maddie didn't come home for dinner, her parents grew worried. They called her name to the neighborhood, knocked on doors, and searched the nearby yards. As night fell, their worry deepened into panic. By midnight, Maddie's disappearance was reported to the police. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office responded immediately. A search party was formed, and soon the entire community was involved. Helicopters flew overhead. Volunteers combed wooded areas. Police dogs were brought in. Neighbors left their porch lights on, hoping Maddie might somehow find her way back. And through it all, Josh had joined the effort. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Maddie's family, pretending to search. He accepted flyers with her smiling face on them. He watched news crews broadcast from just outside his home. What investigators didn't know, what nobody even suspected, was that Maddie's body was hidden less than 10 feet from where they stood. For 6 long days, the search continued. The Clifton family pleaded on television for their daughter's safe return. "Maddie, if you can hear us, we love you. Her parents cried into the cameras. Meanwhile, Joshua's mother began to notice something strange in her son's room. His waterbed, normally firm, had developed a foul smell and seemed to be leaking. Concerned, she decided to investigate. On November 10th, 6 days after Maddie's disappearance, she lifted the frame of the bed, and what she saw will never leave her memory. There, wrapped in blood-soaked sheets, was a lifeless body of Maddie Clifton. She screamed for her husband. Police were called immediately, and within minutes, the horrifying truth was revealed. The boy everyone trusted, the boy who had been helping the search, was in fact the killer. Joshua Phillips was arrested on the spot. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had hugged Joshua days earlier now stared in disbelief. Reporters swarmed the scene, capturing the stunned reactions of parents who clutched their children tightly, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Investigators, hardened by years of violent crime cases, admitted this one was different. A 14-year-old boy with no history of violence, no clear motive, had killed an 8-year-old neighbor and hidden her body in his room while the entire city searched in vain. Detectives would later say that Joshua's calm demeanor during the search, his ability to keep such a horrific secret for days, chilled them to their core. The case had become not just a tragedy, but a nightmare, one that, as many officers said, would haunt them for the rest of their careers. The night Maddie Clifton's body was discovered, police officers flooded the Phillips household. The once quiet street was lit up with flashing blue and red lights. Neighbors stood in stunned silence, whispering in disbelief. Joshua Phillips, just 14 years old, sat in the back of a patrol car. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He had spent the last 6 days living with Maddie's body under his bed, pretending everything was normal, even while the entire city searched. Detectives began questioning him almost immediately. At first, Joshua denied everything, but as the evidence mounted the body, the blood, the unmistakable signs of violence, his fragile story began to crack. And then finally he confessed. What he told investigators left them stunned. He claimed it all started with an accident in a game of baseball in the yard gone wrong. Maddie had been hit in the eye with a ball. Terrified of his father's reaction, Joshua said he panicked. Instead of seeking help, instead of walking Maddie home, he dragged her inside and tried to silence her. But silencing her turned into beating her with a baseball bat. Beating turned into stabbing with a knife. And when she wouldn't stop moaning, when her small body still clung to life, he shoved her beneath his waterbed. Maddie suffocated in the dark, trapped under the weight of his bed frame, while Joshua sat above her, living his normal life. Even the most experienced detectives were shaken. One later admitted, it wasn't just a crime, it was his calmness, his ability to live with her body under his bed for days. That's what haunts us. Joshua's confession explained how, but it never truly explained why. There was no history of abuse between Joshua and Maddie, no evidence of sexual assault, no long-standing grudge. In fact, Maddie had always seen Joshua as a friendly older boy. Investigators pressed him for a motive. They asked if he had planned it, if there was something darker at play. Joshua insisted there wasn't. He said he acted in fear. Fear of his father. Fear of getting in trouble for having a girl in the house when his parents weren't home. But for investigators, that explanation never sat right. Fear might cause panic. Fear might lead to bad decisions. But fear alone did not explain 7 stab wounds. Fear alone did not explain living with a body under his bed for a week. There was something missing in Joshua's story. Something he could never quite articulate, and that silence, that void of explanation, would follow the case forever. In 1999, Joshua Phillips was charged as an adult with first-degree murder. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from across the country filled the seats. The Clifton family sat just feet away from the boy who had killed their daughter. Prosecutors painted Joshua as a cold-blooded killer. They replayed his taped confession, described the brutality of Maddie's injuries, and reminded the jury of how he had hidden her body for 6 days while pretending to help in the search. The defense, meanwhile, argued that Joshua was not a monster, but a child who had panicked. They highlighted his clean record, his good grades, his lack of any criminal history. They pleaded with the jury to see him as a scared teenager, not a hardened killer. but the evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of Maddie's injuries, the discovery of her body, Joshua's own words. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Investigators, forensic experts, neighbors. Each detail made the horror more real. The jury listened in silence, struggling to reconcile the quiet, nervous boy sitting before them with the brutality of his actions. It took the jury just 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. In Florida at the time, that conviction meant an automatic sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joshua's mother broke down in tears as the sentence was read. His father sat in silence, staring at the floor. The Clifton family, though shattered by grief, expressed relief that justice had been served. But even as Joshua was led away in handcuffs, questions lingered. Why did he do it? Was it truly an accident that spiraled out of control, or was there something darker inside him? For investigators, those questions would never fully be answered. Joshua Phillips entered prison as a boy, at just 15 years old. He was the youngest inmate in the Florida correctional system. He grew up behind bars, serving a life sentence while other teenagers went to prom, graduated, started jobs, and lived their lives. Over the years, he granted a few interviews. In them, he often appeared soft-spoken, almost gentle, far from the image of a killer. He admitted regret. He admitted that he could never explain why he did what he did. "I didn't know how to handle it," he once said. "I was just scared." But for Maddie's family, remorse could never bring back their daughter. For investigators who worked the case, the memory never faded. The image of Maddie's body under that bed, the realization that they had searched the neighborhood tirelessly, not knowing the answer had been right in front of them. One detective later recalled, "We knocked on that door. We looked Joshua in the eye, and the whole time she was in his room." That's something I'll never forget. The case continues to haunt because it defies understanding. Joshua wasn't a gang member. He wasn't abused. He wasn't known for violence. He was an ordinary teenager. Maddie was an ordinary little girl. And yet, tragedy unfolded. Today, the case of Joshua Phillips stands as one of the most shocking examples of a teen killer in American history. It forces us to confront difficult questions. How well do we really know the people living next door? How much darkness can hide behind a child's smile? And how do we find closure when the answers never truly come? Maddie Clifton should have grown up. She should have played softball through high school, gone to prom, fallen in love, and built a future. Instead, her life ended in the most brutal way imaginable. Joshua Phillips, just 14 years old at the time, ensured that Maddie never had that chance. And though decades have passed, the case remains burned into the memories of investigators, neighbors, and anyone who followed the story. Because some crimes fade with time, but others never stop haunting us. This is one of them.